He gave me my mother's necklace, saying it was a promise to me he prepared a ceremony that made me feel like the center of the world. Chapter 24: The Necklace. Luna's Presentation Ceremony Day. Adelina SPOV. I woke up feeling incredibly weak and drained, as if the weight of the past few days had settled in every fiber of my being. My mind was a tangled mess, a storm of questions I couldn't seem to untangle. Maximus' terms from yesterday echoed in my head, lingering like a shadow I couldn't shake. I hadn't anticipated that. I never thought he would set such conditions that left me wondering why. Why would he want a real relationship with me? I know he doesn't care about me, not in any true sense. It made no sense for him to demand something more than just the formal agreement of our union. Was it simply about the throne? About power? I knew that much. He needed me to strengthen his position, to solidify his claim. But why the insistence on this relationship? Why bother when he clearly had no real feelings for me? What was his gain? What was he trying to achieve by making this request? It felt like an enigma I couldn't quite solve, and it drove me crazy. I tossed and turned in my bed all night, the restless thoughts circling endlessly. There was no use torturing myself with questions I couldn't answer. Why was I trying to understand him anyway? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. We were partners only in name, not in spirit. There could never be anything between us that resembled love. We both knew that. A relationship between us would never flourish. There was no foundation for it. No mutual feelings to build on. As dawn crept in, the morning light offered little relief. The best thing I could do was stop overthinking it and get on with my day. I decided to push the doubts aside. At least for now. I had my routine to follow, and that was the only thing that kept me grounded. I stood in front of the mirror, brushing my teeth, when a knock came at the door. Surprised. It was much earlier than expected. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The girl who cleaned my room every day always came later. Maybe she needed to pass by earlier today for some reason. I rinsed my mouth quickly and called out, "Just a second, please," as I hurried to open the door. To my surprise, it wasn't Maria. Standing there was Marissa, my friend, the one I trusted. She was supposed to arrive until later, but there she was, standing at my doorstep, looking a little sheepish but also determined. Taken aback by her early arrival. "What are you doing here?" She smiled faintly, though it was clear she was a little nervous. "I know we agreed for me to come around noon, but I thought maybe you could use some company. After everything that happened yesterday, I thought it would be good to talk." I couldn't help but feel a wave of relief wash over me. It'd been desperate to talk to someone about what had transpired, to voice my thoughts and fears out loud. Maybe it wouldn't fix everything, but at least it would help release some of the tension that had been building inside of me. "Thank you." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Stepping aside to let her in. "You have no idea how much I needed this." Marissa sat on the edge of my bed, her posture tense, and I could feel the weight of her gaze even as I got ready in the bathroom. I quickly dressed, taking a moment to pull myself together. When I returned to the room, I found her waiting, her expression far more serious than I'd ever seen it before. "Let's go." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Grabbing my purse, eager to get away from the packed house and the weight of yesterday's events, we decided to head to a little bistro in the city center, a quiet place where we could avoid any unwanted run-ins, especially with Maximus or Gina. I didn't want to face them right now. The bistro was cozy, and they served the best pancakes I had ever tasted, with strawberry jam and praline that melted in your mouth. We arrived and settled into a corner booth, placing our order coffees, croissants, and, of course, the pancakes. The food arrived quickly, And we dug in, our hunger evident after everything that had happened. Once the waitress left and the room grew quieter, Marissa couldn't hold back anymore. She looked at me, clearly frustrated, and finally spoke up. "I thought you said you wanted to move on," she began, her voice laced with confusion. "So why on earth did you go to his office and propose such a thing? What's the matter with you, Adelina?" Her frown deepened as she leaned in, eyes searching mine as if trying to understand what I had been thinking. Setting my fork down as I thought about how best to explain. Marissa had always been my confidant, the one person who understood me completely, but today, her disappointment was palpable, and it made my heart ache. I knew she was just looking out for me, but everything felt so complicated. I know the agreement and, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The term he said doesn't exactly favor me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Looking down at my plate as I picked at the food. But there's no other way. This is the only option I have. Her gaze hardened, her arms crossed in front of her as she leaned back in her seat. "Yes, there is. Reject him and go away," she said sternly, as if it were the simplest solution in the world. I shook my head, my heart sinking. "Do you really believe he would just let me go?" To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. If I rejected him, he would not let me walk away without consequences. I'd really make sure I pay for it by hurting my family, by hurting you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He knows how much I love Alex, how much I care about the people in my life. I couldn't bear to have their blood on my hands. You know that. I don't think he would attack Alex on me, Marissa said, her voice soft but firm. We're part of his pack. He has no excuse to harm us. And as for your family, I don't believe HE'd go that far. At least not until he becomes king. He wouldn't risk damaging his image. That gives us time to figure out something else. I looked down, trying to steady my thought, but the weight of the situation still crushed me. Even if that's the case, he wouldn't let me go easily. He needs me to win the throne. So much is at stake. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I exclaimed in despair. She gave me a hard look, the frustration evident on her face. "So you've decided to help him by sacrificing yourself. After everything HE has done, how can you even think about doing that? Have you completely lost your mind?" Adelina, running a hand through my hair. "In not doing it to help him. In doing it to help myself." Her brow furrowed. "How exactly are you helping yourself?" "I don't want to be a fugitive," I confessed, my voice softer now. "What's the point of running if I have to live in hiding? Constantly scared of being found. That's worse than staying here with Maximus. At least here, I have my friends, my job, a routine. I've thought about this for days. If I help him become king, he'll have the chance to leave. He'll live my life the way I want to. I just need to be patient for a few months." She shook her head, disbelief written across her face. "What makes you think hell let you go once HE is king?" I hesitated, but then spoke with certainty. "He doesn't love me as his mate. He never did. And he gets bored easily. He knows I won't do him any favors. So he'll go back to the women who cater to his every whim. Like Gina. He won't need me anymore." Marissa stared at me, clearly in shock. "That's your plan?" To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I smiled wryly, trying to mask the growing anxiety in my chest. If that doesn't work out, I've got plan B. Her expression shifted from disbelief to intrigue. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of my decisions pressing on me, but I refused to let it show. Let's just say, it's a bit more complicated, but it will work. You know what? Let's eat our pancakes before they get cold. We have a lot to do today, and we need the energy, I suggested, trying to steer the conversation away from the heavy topic. Marisa raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Don't shy away from the subject. To my agent extraordinaire, Maya Nobe, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You're lucky I love pancakes. They smell great. Diving into her plate with enthusiasm, we ate in relative silence, the comfort of good food easing the tension for a moment. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. We headed back to my room, where I felt a wave of exhaustion hit me. The morning had been filled with errands and shopping, and although I hadn't done much physically, my body felt drained. I opted to skip lunch and instead took a much-needed nap. My legs were sore and swollen from all the walking, and I could feel the exhaustion weighing on me. At least I had a few hours of peace before the chaos started again. Chris had informed me earlier through our mind link that the girls would arrive at 5 p.m. to help with the ceremony preparations. He was the one assigned to organizing everything, though it was pretty obvious that he wasn't thrilled about it. Honestly, I can't blame him. This whole ceremony felt like a formality I'd rather avoid, but there was no getting out of it. With a sigh, I sank into my bed, hoping for some rest before the madness began. I woke up to a loud knock on the door. A girl's voice called my name. Miss Ottolina. Oh my goddess. The girls are already here. I jumped up from my bed in a panic and rushed toward the door. I opened it, allowing the girls to enter and begin setting up their things while I quickly went to take a bath. I desperately needed one after the long day. As I stepped out of the bathroom, I saw Elmina, who was the first to take charge. She began working on my hair while another girl, I think her name was Sandra, started on my makeup. Even though we still had plenty of time until the ceremony started at 9 o'clock, the girls were moving at 4 speed, focused on getting everything just right. The dress was still packed in its case, and I remembered one of the girls mentioning that it had been picked out exclusively by Maximus. I couldn't understand him. Despite claiming not to care about me, he was handling the smallest details regarding my appearance. Maybe it was because he wanted everything to be perfect, especially for the ceremony. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbe, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Just maybe, he was trying to assert control over everything. By 8:15, my makeup and hair were finally done. My makeup was light, just the way I wanted it, shades of light brown and orange on my eyes, framed with a touch of black eyeliner, while my lips were painted red. My hair was styled into an elegant bun, with a few soft curls falling gently at the front. I looked wonderful. I couldn't help but feel satisfied with the result. The girls even painted my fingernails and toenails a soft pale pink with delicate white flowers on them. It was time to unpack the dress. When the girls opened the case, I was left speechless. The dress was absolutely breathtaking, worthy of a queen. The gown was white, cut in a regal, princely style, with a deep, revealing neckline. Both the neckline and the sleeves were covered in precious stones, and embroidered flowers decorated the fabric, starting from the center and cascading down to the hem. It was a magnificent piece, unlike anything I could have ever imagined for myself. And to my astonishment, it was Maximus who had chosen it for me. I had never thought he would be capable of selecting so beautiful. The girls helped me slip into the gown, its weight making it difficult to put on alone. One of them fastened the buttons on my back while the others packed up their things, clearly ready to leave once I was finished. It was 9:15, and I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the final details as two of the girls made sure everything was in place. Suddenly, there was an unexpected knock on the door, halting every owner's movements. One of the girls went to answer it, and to my great surprise, it was Maximus. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It had to be him. He entered the room, dressed in an expensive black tuxedo. He looked every bit the part of a model, immaculate and poised. His presence filled the room, and it took me a moment to collect myself. He was incredibly handsome. With a calm and polite manner, Maximus asked the girls to leave us alone. They promptly obeyed, leaving me standing in front of the mirror. He lingered near the door, his eyes fixed on me. I tried to focus on my reflection, but when our gazes met, I immediately looked away, unsure how to handle the sudden shift in the air. You look amazing. His voice soft, almost in awe. His words hit me harder than I expected. I had never seen him look at me like that before, and it left me momentarily stunned. Thank you, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I was completely caught off guard, and for a moment, I couldn't find my words. I quickly composed myself, trying to regain some control. Calmly. Why are you here? I want to give you something very important to me, he replied, his tone softer than I was accustomed to. What is it? Close your eyes. A playful edge in his voice. Tonight, he felt like a different person, gentle, almost unrecognizable compared to the Maximus I knew. I'd rather not, I answered firmly, trying to maintain my boundaries. Do not hesitate. Just close your eyes for a few seconds. Trust me. Trust him. It felt like an oxymoron. How could I trust him after everything that had happened? Every time I had trusted him before, it had led to pain. He had imprisoned me, hurt me, and broken me. No, I was going to let myself be vulnerable again. Despite his gentle tone, I refused to close my eyes. I kept them open, my gaze unwavering. He looked disappointed, but I was about to let down my guard. Please, close your eyes. I won't hurt you. I swear. His voice more earnest now, his repeated assurances swear on me, and despite myself, I felt a small crack in my resolve. Good, he said when I finally complied, and I could hear his footsteps drawing closer. His presence filled the space behind me, and I felt his breath against my back. His proximity made my skin prickle, an uncomfortable sensation crawling up my spine. Don't be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you. Keep your eyes closed a little longer, he murmured, his voice low and almost seductive. The way he spoke made my heart race, and I found myself torn between pushing him away and giving in to whatever he was trying to do. And then something cold and metallic brushed against my neck. My mind racing. It was a necklace. Before I could even react, Maximus gently placed it around my neck, his voice lowering in a seductive tone. Open your eyes now. As I opened my eyes, the sight before me took my breath away. The necklace was a masterpiece, delicate yet bold. Small white diamonds lined the edges, and in the center, a large blue sapphire glimmered with an ethereal glow. I had never seen such a stunning and expensive piece of jewelry in my life. It was exquisite. Maximus broke the silence, his voice smooth as he spoke about the necklace's significance. It belonged to my mother. My father gave it to her as a wedding gift. I want you to have it as my Luna and a new member of the Drive AKO family. With this necklace, I promise you my unlimited devotion and protection. His words hung in the air, and I was struck by the weight of what he was saying. But something in my chest tightened, and I found myself speaking up. Maximus, you know, I just cannot accept such an expensive gift. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Trying to maintain my composure, I instinctively reached up to remove the necklace, but Maximus' hand stopped me. He gave me a disapproving look through the mirror, his eyes sharpened and wavering. Of course you can. The necklace belongs to the Luna of the pack. You are the Luna now, he insisted. The necklace is accompanied by earrings. They're in the box if you want to put them on too. I shook my head, my voice firm despite the confusion clouding my thoughts. No, the necklace is more than enough. I will wear it only for the occasion, and then I will give it back to you. As you wish. His tone betraying a hint of displeasure. Though he tried to mask it, his eyes lingered on me for a moment longer, as if he were contemplating something, but he quickly shifted his gaze away, his expression unreadable. Maximus' gaze softened for a moment, and he smiled. You look magnificent. You look like a real queen. I was taken aback by his admiration, unable to fully process the compliment. Thank you. To my agent extraordinaire, Moonlit, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Surprised by the warmth in my chest, though I couldn't deny the confusion that lingered in my heart. If I had been confused before, I was now completely lost. The dress, the necklace, the expensive gifts, why was he doing this? I stood there, unsure of what to make of the whole situation. Maximus had always been unpredictable, but this felt different. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his actions than he was letting on. Was this a sign of genuine care? Or was it just another part of his calculated plans? Only time will tell. My wolf murmured in my mind, offering no clear answers, only uncertainty. For a brief moment, I felt a surge of doubt, but I quickly pushed it aside. Tonight was too important, and I couldn't afford to get lost in uncertainty. There were still many pieces of the puzzle left to figure out, but for now, all I could do was face the night ahead. Chapter 25 Luna's Ceremony Adelina SPOV. I suddenly snapped out of my hypnosis and said seriously, please stop the act. There's no point in telling me these things. We're alone right now. I've already accepted our deal. As long as you honor it. I'm satisfied. You don't have to convince me of anything, I know your true feelings. His piercing gaze met mine as he replied. What I do or say, it's because I feel it. Not because I want to convince you of anything. Besides, I don't need to. I turned away, unable to bear the intensity of his eyes or the weight of his words. As much as my heart had longed to hear them, I couldn't bring myself to believe him. Not now. Not like this. So I did what I always did to escape an uncomfortable situation. I changed the subject. I thought I'd be going to the clearing alone, where you and the rest of the pack would already be waiting. Why are you here? Don't you realize you're going to be late? You're wrong, he said calmly. This time, we won't follow the traditional way. Everything will be different. And why is that? Frowning, his eyes locked onto mine, unwavering, because many things have changed since the day I met you. For me, many things have changed too, I said sadly, contradicting him. And unfortunately, not for the better. Maximus didn't seem fazed by my words. He took a few steps closer, his demeanor flirtatious. I instinctively moved back, maintaining the distance between us. We're going to be late. We should get going, I pointed out firmly, hoping to redirect the moment. I suppose you're right, he said with a sigh. Still, he closed the gap again, offering his elbow. I hesitated. His newfound charm was disarming, sweet yet unsettling. After a brief pause, I placed my hand on his elbow. The moment I did, that familiar spark coursed through me, igniting every nerve. A knot formed in my stomach, yet at the same time, I felt something I had never experienced before: safety, security, belonging. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was in the right place, like I belonged by his side. In his arms. What's wrong with me? Is the bond working? I wondered, my thoughts racing. We left the house together, flanked by 4 guards who trailed behind silently. Our steps were slow and measured. To my agent extraordinaire, Moonlit, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Maximus kept his head high, nodding and waving to pack members lining the road, their cheers and praise echoing around us. Though I mirrored his confidence outwardly, holding my head high, I felt more at ease than I'd expected, even happy as I waved back to them. When we reached the clearing, The guards halted, leaving us to continue alone toward the sacred rock. The setting ahead was breathtaking, like a scene from a storybook. The sky was clear, stars and constellations visible in their full glory. The full moon bathed the clearing in silver light, giving the landscape an otherworldly, magical glow. Shadows from the trees along the cliff played with the moonlight, forming a path enhanced by torches that flickered gently on either side. In front of the rock, standing tall on a platform, was the priest of our goddess. He wore ceremonial robes of white and gold Artemis as sacred colors and held a golden knife etched with intricate religious carvings. His other hand gripped a golden chalice. As we approached, the priest raised his hand, signaling for silence. Solomon commanding rang through the clearing. We are gathered here today, first to thank our goddess Artemis for revealing our new unit to our Alpha, and second, to witness their union. May our goddess be eternally glorified. May our goddess be eternally glorified. The crowd responded in perfect unison. The priest gestured again for quiet before continuing. With the strength given to me by our goddess, I bless your union. May it be filled with prosperity. To my agent extraordinaire, Mythical Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, and security. May our lords be healthy, and always united as one. Let our lords be blessed. The crowd exclaimed in reverence. The priest then raised the golden knife, holding the chalice steady in his other hand. Turning to Maximus, he asked for his hand. With a swift, practiced motion, he sliced Maximus's palm, letting a few drops of blood drip into the cup. He then turned to me, repeating the same action with my hand. As the crimson drops mixed, the priest added a green substance to the chalice and began chanting verses in a low, melodic tone. A small explosion erupted in the cup, releasing a plume of white smoke that spiraled upward. The priest's eyes lit up with satisfaction as a broad smile spread across his face. The omens have spoken. It seems we are entering a prosperous and productive era with our new Luna. Our goddess has spoken loud and clear. Blessed be you, our Alpha and our Luna, the priest declared, his voice ringing out. The crowd echoed his words cheerfully, their energy palpable. At that moment, a strange heaviness settled over me. My mind buzzed as I began to feel the surge of emotions and thoughts flowing in through the bond I now shared with the pack as their Luna. I caught snippets of encouragement from some and doubt from others. Whispers of admiration mingled with skepticism. Some of the older pack members questioned the unusual nature of the ceremony. Why didn't Maximus follow tradition? Why was this lunar ceremony different? What's the purpose of all this? Their thoughts murmured in my mind. Though their questions tugged at my confidence, I pushed them aside, determined not to let them affect me. Maximus stepped onto the podium, commanding immediate silence. His sheer presence alone seemed to command respect, a remarkable power that required not a single word. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, he began, his voice resonating through the clearing. I want to thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate the initiation of our Luna. I have fought tirelessly to make this pack the best, the strongest, and the most powerful in the entire world. But tonight, things are different. And from this moment forward, I will no longer stand alone. Our Luna will stand beside me, and together, we will lead this pack into a new era, an era of peace and prosperity. May the goddess continue to guide us all. He raised his hand with conviction, his voice booming with authority. Hail our Luna! Hail our pack! The crowd erupted in unison, their voices thunderous. Hail Luna! Hail Drive KO pack! Enough with words. It's time to shift and accompany our Luna in the traditional round of triumph. Shift, Maximus commanded, his voice firm yet laced with excitement. In an instant, he shifted into his magnificent dark blue wolf. Drive AKO. Under the moonlight, his grey eyes sparkled with a power and confidence that seemed almost otherworldly. The round of triumph was a ceremonial lap around the pack's borders to mark a new era of leadership. However, given that our borders span thousands of miles, The tradition had been adapted to include only the northern edge of the territory. Drive A.K.O. stood tall, waiting patiently for my wolf to lead. Taking a deep breath, I stepped back, sipped off my gown, and handed it to an Omega standing nearby. I felt a pang of vulnerability as I shifted into my white wolf. My snowy coat glistened under the moonlight as I joined him, and together we began the run. We moved in perfect unison, side by side, weaving through the forest with an effortless grace. Behind us, the pack followed in their wolf forms, their paw steps thundering like a heartbeat through the woods. When the run was complete, we returned to the house and separated to prepare for the evening's celebration. I chose a simple yet elegant look for the party, a white cocktail dress paired with off-white heels and small diamond earrings. Time was short, so I left my makeup and touched and tied my hair back into a neat ponytail. With a final glance in the mirror, I left my room and made my way to the living room. There stood Maximus, waiting for me. He wore a light blue linen shirt that perfectly complemented his strong frame, paired with relaxed trousers and brown sandals. The sight of him left me momentarily breathless. He was simply irresistible. He extended his arm with a small smile. I looped mine through his, and together we headed toward the party. The celebration was held in the garden, which was beautiful enough during the day with its vibrant flower beds and the tower oak tree in the center. But tonight, it was utterly enchanting. Round tables covered in white linens were surrounded by white chairs, each illuminated by the soft glow of candles placed in every corner. The oak tree had been transformed into a dazzling centerpiece, adorned with cascading white and yellow lights. Each table held a gold candle that flickered gently, casting warm light over the scene. In the middle of the arrangement stood a small round table with 2 chairs, reserved for Maximus and me. To our right, beside the kitchen door, was a magical buffet brimming with a variety of delicious foods, decadent sweets, and a wide array of drinks. To the left, a white booth decorated with yellow lights housed the live band. Waiters and waitresses moved gracefully through the crowd, offering refreshments and drinks. Laughter and conversation filled the air as some guests talked in animated groups while others had already taken to the dance floor, swaying to the smooth sounds of jazz and soul. The garden radiated magic, a perfect reflection of the night itself. As we entered the garden, the lively chatter and music abruptly stopped, replaced by a wave of applause. Every pair of eyes turned to us as we made our way through the crowd, smiling graciously. We walked past rows of tables before finally taking our seats at the central one. Before we could even finish our dinner, Maximus suggested we get up to greet the guests. I followed his lead, knowing this was part of the responsibilities of an Alpha and Luna. The crowd was limited to members of our pack. Many Alphas and Lunas from neighboring packs were in attendance, along with several council members. Maximus was attentive and polite with everyone, taking time to stop at each table and exchange pleasantries. It was clear how deeply he valued hospitality and respect. As we moved through the garden, I spotted Alex and Marissa sitting at one of the tables. I longed to sit with them, to catch up and share a moment of familiarity amidst the formalities, but we didn't have the luxury. At some tables, our stay was brief, with a few cordial greetings exchanged. At others, Maximus lingered, engaging in discussions about matters I couldn't yet fully grasp. While he conversed, I remained silent, my role reduced to a polite smile and brief answers whenever someone addressed me directly. When we had greeted every guest, we returned to our table. I sipped my drink, grateful for the moment of quiet, when Maximus turned to me with a suggestion that took me by surprise. "Would you care to dance?" His tone warm but confident. I considered declining after all. I was sure I wanted the additional attention, but when he stood and extended his hand toward me, I knew I couldn't refuse. Hesitantly, I took his hand, allowing him to lead me to the stage. As we stepped onto the dance floor, the band began to play "Stand By Me" by Benny. My heart skipped a beat. How did they know? It was my parents' wedding song, What I used to play on repeat as a child so I could dance to it with my dad. I couldn't tell if this was a coincidence or if Maximus had requested it specifically for me. Either way, it felt deeply personal, as though the universe had conspired to make this moment even more meaningful. Maximus stepped closer, his face mere inches from mine. His gaze was intense, yet somehow tender, and I felt myself getting lost in it. We danced slowly, moving as if no one else existed, as if the entire garden had faded away, leaving only the two of us. The song ended, but before I could process it, another began. We continued to dance, still locked in each other's gaze, the world around us a blur. But then, out of nowhere, a man approached us. I felt him before I saw him, a presence that sent a ripple through the air. He tapped Maximus gently on the shoulder and spoke in a low, familiar voice. "May I borrow your Luna? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Maximus turned to face him, clearly irritated by the interruption. As he moved, the man behind him came into full view. My heart leapt in my chest. Standing before me was a tall, strikingly handsome man dressed in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. His polished appearance radiated elegance, his confidence commanding attention without a single word. He looked stunning, absolutely breathtaking. And though I couldn't quite place it yet, there was something about him, something familiar that made my pulse quicken. Chapter 26. A pleasant surprise. Adelina SPOV. The man standing before me was none other than my beloved father. I exclaimed, my voice trembling with excitement. "My beautiful daughter," he replied warmly, his face lighting up with a toothy smile as he opened his arms wide. I didn't hesitate. I rushed into his embrace like a bird returning to its nest, hugging him tightly, the familiar scent of him, the warmth of his arms, the joy of hearing his voice, all it flooded me with emotion. Goddess, how I'd missed him. It missed everything about him, his laugh, even his occasional scolding s. "I missed you, Dad," I said, my voice soft yet overflowing with happiness. "And I missed you too, Pumpkin," he replied, gently caressing my cheek with a fatherly tenderness. He kissed my forehead, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. We simply looked at each other, savoring the reunion as though the rest of the world had melted away. Then, as if on cue, the music shifted, and he took my hand, guiding me into a dance. "I thought you wouldn't come. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." A hint of reproach in my tone. How could I miss this? His chest puffing with pride. My beautiful daughter, becoming the Luna of the most powerful pack in the world. His words filled my heart with warmth. Have the others come as well? Glancing around the tables in search of familiar faces, only Jake managed to make it. "Stella wasn't feeling very well," he explained, my brows furrowed with concern. "No," he assured me with a chuckle. "She's been dealing with morning sickness that seems to ruin the rest of her day." Morning sickness? Wait, you mean she's pregnant? My voice rising with excitement. He nodded, his eyes twinkling. "Well, that's wonderful," I exclaimed, practically bouncing on the spot. But then a thought struck me, and I pouted. How did that happen? When did she find her mate? She didn't mention anything on the phone. My father laughed, clearly amused by my reaction. "We'll have time to talk about Stella later," my father said, his tone shifting to one of gentle concern. "Now tell me about you. How are you? How is life here? Are you happy with Maximus? Does he treat you well? I want to hear everything. You've been awfully quiet about it on the phone." His sharp gaze pierced through me, and I quickly averted my eyes. I knew that if I looked directly at him, I wouldn't be able to keep up my facade. I gave him a small smile, directing my gaze elsewhere. "I'm very good, Dad. Everyone here treats me well. I have a promising job. I've made new friends. and I've even started picking up my hobbies again. He nodded slowly, a small smile forming. I'm glad to hear that. But once again, you haven't said much about Maximus. How are things between you two? Very well, I replied hastily, the words spilling out too quickly to sound natural. My father's expression hardened, and his eyes narrowed slightly as he studied me. Adelina, he began in that tone that always made me feel like a child caught red-handed. You know there have never been any secrets between us. I hope it stays that way. I know, I muttered, lowering my gaze, guilt twisting in my chest. His words struck a chord, making my earlier lies feel heavier. But how could I tell him the truth about my life here? If he knew how complicated things were, Hed furious, likely furious enough to confront Maximus. Take action against him. That would only lead to disaster for everyone involved. Before I could spiral further into my thoughts, a familiar voice cut through the tension. May I interrupt? Maximus asked, placing a hand on my father's shoulder. My father turned, his stern expressions softening. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Maximus, it seems you can't stay too far from her, he remarked with a knowing smirk before stepping aside. Take care of her, he added before walking away, leaving me alone with Maximus. Yes, Maximus replied, a small smile tugging at his lips. Just like that, I was saved by the bell. Maximus had appeared out of nowhere, intervening at the most opportune moment to rescue me from the difficult questions my father had cornered me with. You seem to be in a bit of a pickle there, Maximus said with a sly smile, motioning toward our table. Shall we? Yes, I'm feeling a little tired, I admitted, grateful for the escape. We made our way back to our table, stopping briefly to greet a few members of the party. Once we were seated, I tried to shake off the lingering tension from my conversation with my father, but I couldn't ignore the burning question in my mind. How did Maximus know I needed saving? He had been too far away to hear our conversation, and yet Hed had shown up at precisely the right moment. The thought nagged at me, clouding my ability to fully enjoy the evening. Unable to hold back any longer, I turned to him. How did you know? My curiosity getting the better of me. Know what? He replied, tilting his head in mild confusion. How did you know to step in at the perfect time? Is the bond working? Can you feel my emotions? I fired off the questions in quick succession, barely pausing for breath. Maximus raised an amused brow, a sly smile playing on his lips. No, I can't feel anything. How could I? We haven't marked each other yet. Then how did you do it? My confusion growing. I just heard you talking. That's all, he replied nonchalantly. His response was so simple that it left me momentarily speechless. Could it really have been that straightforward? You just heard us howl. Even for a werewolf. You were way too far to overhear. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Still puzzled, you forget that I'm not just any werewolf, but an alpha lycan, Maximus explained, a teasing glint in his eyes. My senses are far more acute than those of ordinary wolves. Oh, right. I totally forgot, I muttered, feeling a little embarrassed for not remembering. Clearly amused. Don't worry. Soon, you'll be able to do it too. Do what? When I mark you, you'll gain some of my lycan abilities, he explained with a knowing wink. Mark me. My eyes widened in disbelief. Yes, why the look? Do you really think we won't mark each other eventually? His voice easing but serious. To be honest, I hadn't even considered that possibility. I admitted, feeling a bit uncomfortable with the thought. You should, he said firmly. We're mates. It's expected that we'll mark each other. I don't want to mark you, I said quickly, feeling a twinge of resistance. Let alone let you mark me. He raised an eyebrow, unfazed. I'm sorry to disappoint you, sweetheart, But you won't have a choice. Oh, I do have a choice. And besides, there's nothing in our agreement about this. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My voice steady but firm. Well then, we'll just need to redefine the terms, he said with a self-assured grin. No, I responded firmly. We won't redefine anything. I won't allow myself to be mocked by someone who doesn't even know how to be a mate. He chuckled softly, though there was a slight edge to his amusement. I'm afraid you will. But this isn't the time or place for such discussions. He looked around the room, his eyes scanning the crowd. Then, with a sudden motion, he stood up abruptly and left the table. I sat there in silence, the weight of our conversation hanging in the air. Things were getting more complicated by the minute. My mind raced with thoughts of how I could avoid marking him, but then a hand appeared in front of me, breaking my train of thought. I looked up, surprised to see Nicholas standing there, a wide smile on his face. He looked especially handsome in his white shirt and navy blue pants. May I have this dance, my lady? Nicholas asked, his smile infectious. When did you get here? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Standing up in excitement. With your folks, he replied casually. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Father forgot to mention it. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Laughing a little. I'm sure he was so happy to see you that he didn't remember to mention me. He replied with a playful grin. Well, I'm glad you're here. How are you? Genuinely happy to see him. I'm all right. His eyes sparkling with humor. I haven't seen you in at least a month. You completely disappeared that night. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Raising an eyebrow, Nicholas's expression shifted to one of playful accusation. Don't play that card. Young lady, you disappeared to that night. But to answer your question, something came up, and I had to leave immediately. And you? He leaned in slightly, a mischievous glint in his eyes. What's your excuse? Young lady, something came up for me too. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Giving him a teasing smile. Yes, I know. You became the Luna of the most powerful pack in the world. Nicholas said, his voice incredulous. I can't say I'm happy about it. I was hoping you'd have a chance with you. But we aren't mates. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Trying to keep my voice steady. You knew that. Why hope for something with me when your mate is out there, waiting for you? Wouldn't you want to meet her? I have already met her. His voice falling. That's really something. I asked. My curiosity piqued. My mate died a long time ago, he said quietly, a shadow falling over his expression. I blinked, my heart sinking. I am so sorry to hear that. I really don't know what to say, I muttered, feeling an awkward lump form in my throat. He replied softly, his voice dimmed with sadness. You don't have to say anything. Some people aren't as lucky as others. When I met you, I thought fortune had finally smiled on me again. But I was wrong. His words heavy with regret. The pain in his eyes cut deeper than I expected. I didn't know how to respond, because there was nothing I could say to make this better. His sorrow felt so palpable that it almost consumed the space between us. I could feel the weight of his unspoken grief, the kind of loss that didn't just fade with time but stayed, etched into the very fabric of who he was. And as I looked at him, my mind struggled to make sense of what he was going through. How do you even begin to measure pain like that? To find your mate, only to lose them before you could really know them. How do you move on from that kind of heartbreak? I thought of my own situation, how Maximus and I had come together, not by chance, but by an agreement, and the bond that was supposed to make us one felt suffocating at times. How could it be that some people yearn so deeply for a connection, while others, like Nicholas, have it and lose it so tragically? It was impossible to say which fate was worse, to never meet your mate at all, or to find them and lose them far too soon. How did this happen? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Nicholas asked, his voice lighter, perhaps sensing the somber mood. I mean, you and Maximus knew each other before his accident. Right. Didn't you know you were mates before? Or did you only find out then? I hesitated, my stomach twisting. It was a complicated, tangled story, one I wasn't ready to dive into. It's a long story, I said quickly, trying to steer us away from the topic. It's better we just go dance instead. We shifted the conversation to lighter topics, reminiscing about how we'd met at the club, the unlikely friendship between Jake and Nicholas, and how satisfied everyone was with the financial agreements they'd made. I kept the conversation away from Maximus and me, unsure of what to even say. Did I tell him that Maximus had treated me terribly at the start? Or that we had an agreement, one where he would become king and I would gain my freedom? I tried looking around for Jake, but I couldn't spot him in the crowd. I turned to Nicholas. Could you take me to the table where my brother's sitting? Maybe I'll finally see him. Nicholas led me through the room, his arms slipping around my waist as we walked. His touch was bold, but I didn't say anything, unsure of how to respond. We were moving through the tables when a loud growl suddenly echoed from behind us. Where exactly are you going? Adelina. Maximus's voice was low. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. And why is this man touching you? Chapter 27, Sharing Room. Adelina Espiovi. Maximus's eyes never left mine, his intense gaze making the air between us feel thick with tension. I could feel his anger rising, though his expression remained cool and controlled. There was something in his eyes, something unspoken, that made my heart race. It was just about what Nicholas had said. It was as if he was looking right through me, trying to read the truth in my expression. I'm waiting. Adelina, Maximus said again, his voice firm, but there was an undercurrent of something else, something almost accusatory. Where were you going? Maximus Draco. Nice to meet you again, Nicholas said haughtily, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You never cease to amaze me. But I must admit, this time you've got me. Maximus didn't seem to react to the theatrics. He raised a brow, his expression indifferent. How so? The words flat and casual, as if he didn't care in the slightest. Nicholas continued, clearly enjoying himself. You always manage to make a difference. Even tonight at the Luna's ceremony. The choice of your Luna was like a bolt from the blue, he remarked, a sardonic edge creeping into his voice. Maximus let out a breath, his posture stiff but controlled. It wasn't in my plans to surprise you. Believe me, he said coolly, the politeness in his tone almost suffocating. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I don't think the other alphas are as interested in my personal life as you are. Nicholas, however, was easily rattled. He shrugged off the indirect jab, undeterred. I thought the redhead following you everywhere, like a puppy, would be your Luna. To be honest, I'm not the only one who believes that. His words laced with a hint of mockery. Maximus's gaze hardened slightly, though his outward calmness remained unshaken. I never said or gave the impression that Gina was my mate, or that she would become my Luna. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My personal life is none of your concern, he said coldly, his voice laced with an icy detachment that seemed to make the air around us tense. I don't tell you, or anyone else, an explanation. It is my abilities that made me a candidate for claiming the throne, not my sexual performance. Not that I'm lagging behind in that area," he added with a sharp, almost condescending smile, an oaken challenge lingering in his words. Nicholas, however, didn't flinch or show any sign of being intimidated. He merely chuckled, as if the words bounced off him like water off a duck's back. "Relax, Maximus. Don't get upset," he said with a teasing edge, his voice smooth and casual, but the smirk on his lips suggested he was enjoying this little verbal duel far too much. "No one is here to question your abilities." The words almost dripping with sarcasm, and just telling you it's being whispered at nearly every table tonight. His tone was deliberately provocative, and he seemed to take pleasure in pushing Maximus's buttons, testing his patience and sense of control. It was almost like a game to Nicholas, one where he knew how far he could go before Maximus's composure would crack. The words hung in the air, thick with tension. Maximus's jaw clenched slightly, but he didn't allow the provocation to break his icy exterior. His expression remained unreadable, his stoic demeanor only adding to the sense that the interaction was far from over. Nicholas, on the other hand, appeared unbothered, relishing the moment. For some reason, Nicholas's manner, despite being just a simple observation of the gossip, felt ominous. There was a subtle threat hidden in his words, though it wasn't immediately clear why. Perhaps it was the way he said it, like he was playing some dangerous game. Maximus ignored Nicholas's final comment, his attention snapping back to me. His voice hardened, his tone commanding as he addressed me, the change in his demeanor palpable. In waiting for an answer, "Adelina, where were you going?" Before I could answer, Nicholas stepped in again, his voice smooth but carrying an undertone of tange. "I was simply taking her to Jake, her brother. That's all. Nothing suspicious happening here. She is your mate after all." His eyes glinting with mischief. "No one is going to steal her from you, as long as you love her and take care of her." His smirk was sharp, almost predatory, and it didn't sit right with me. It was as if he was enjoying this interaction a little too much, toying with fire just to see what might burn. Maximus's eyes narrowed at Nicholas's words, and he shot me a piercing look. His gaze felt accusatory, as if he was silently blaming me for saying to Nicholas, revealing the cracks in our relationship, or the way he had been treating me all along. "What are you implying?" Maximus asked, his voice low, dangerous, and filled with an intensity that made the air between us feel thick with tension. His stare was unwavering, focused entirely on Nicholas. Before I could speak, the sound of my brother's excited voice rang out from across the room. "Adelina," Jake shouted, waving his arms in the air as he made his way toward us. The abrupt interruption felt like a lifeline, and I quickly turned my attention toward him. Grateful for the escape, I turned instinctively toward the sound, relief flooding through me. Jake. At least he was someone I could rely on. A familiar face, a familiar presence in this sea of uncertainty. Maximus seemed to bristle at Jake's shout. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." His gaze snapping toward the source of the sound. There was something possessive in the way he looked at me, something that made me wonder just how far he would go to keep me close. How far would he push me, pull me, to make sure I stayed in line with whatever plans he had for us? I'm going to go see him. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." The words finally slipping from my lips, though I didn't know how convincing I sounded. I felt Maximus's eyes on me, but I couldn't meet his gaze. Not right now. Jake was already heading toward us, his face lighting up when he saw me. The tension in the air seemed to ease just a little as he reached us, giving me a quick hug and then turning his attention to Maximus. "Alpha Maximus," Jake said, his voice friendly, but with an undertone of caution. "How's everything going?" Maximus gave a tight nod, but his gaze never left me. "Well, see, To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Before turning away and walking off, leaving a cloud of tension in his wake, Jack and I watched him go. And for a moment, there was silence between us. I could feel Jake's concerned gaze on me, but I didn't know how to explain what had just happened. How could I tell him about the growing storm inside me, about how I felt torn between my own desires, my loyalty to my father and my pack, and the overwhelming pressure that Maximus seemed to exert without even trying? "Are you okay, Princess?" Jake asked, his voice low and filled with genuine concern, his eyes searching mine as if trying to gauge whether I was truly all right. "I'm fine, Jake. And you? How are you coping as the alpha of the pack?" Trying to divert the conversation to something less personal, though I appreciated his worry. "Very good. Your financial plan is already in implementation, and it's going really well." Winking at me with that trademark, playful grin that always seemed to make everything feel lighter. "Wait a minute. Are you telling me that the financial plan you presented to me was Adelina's?" Nicholas asked Jake, his voice rising in surprise, clearly thrilled by the revelation. His eyes sparkled with genuine admiration as he turned toward me. "Wow, now I'm really surprised. You're a genius. Adelina, did you know that?" Maximus rolled his eyes at Nicholas's enthusiasm, his posture stiffening ever so slightly. I could feel his annoyance seeping into the atmosphere, but I also knew he was about to lose his composure over something as trivial as Nicholas's praise. "I think you're over-exaggerating, Nicholas," I replied timidly, a slight blush creeping up my cheeks. I wasn't used to this kind of attention. "No, you're not," Nicholas insisted, still grinning widely. "If you consider that my profits more than doubled after its implementation, you should be proud of that. Adelina," he continued, his voice animated as he turned to Jake. "And all this time, I thought you were the genius behind this." "What a scam, Jake," Nicholas said jokingly, clearly enjoying himself. While Maximus's patience was clearly wearing thin, Jake raised his hands in mock surrender, looking flustered. "I never said the plan was mine," he protested, clearly trying to deflect the attention away from him. Nicholas just smirked, clearly having fun with the exchange. But before the conversation could go further, he turned his attention back to me, his tone shifting slightly. "Adelina, I'd really appreciate your advice on some financial moves I'm planning to make. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'll pay you handsomely for your services." The air between us seemed to grow tense in an instant. Maximus's presence beside me suddenly became suffocating, and I could feel his body stiffen as he stood tall, glaring at Nicholas. "That's enough," Maximus snapped, his voice commanding and strict, carrying the weight of authority. "Adelina is the Luna of my pack. She doesn't need to work for other alphas. She's a pack to take care of." His gaze was hard, his protective nature evident in the sharpness of his words. Nicholas blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the intensity of Maximus's response. "Forgive me, Maximus. I had no bad intentions," he said quickly, holding up his hands in mock surrender. "I didn't know that she works exclusively for you." Maximus's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening with unspoken frustration. It was clear he was thrilled by the idea of me doing anything for anyone other than his pack. His possessiveness was evident, and even though he was trying to maintain control, the situation was still thick with tension. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, like he was silently reminding me of where I belonged. "Well said. Let me add that Adelina belongs exclusively to me, and I'm not used to sharing, if you know what I mean," Maximus said with a cocky grin, his voice oozing authority as he casually placed his hand on my waist, subtly urging me to leave. I could feel the weight of his words and his touch, and my frustration bubbled up inside me like a brewing storm. As we walked away, far enough to avoid being overheard, I couldn't hold back any longer. My voice was sharp and firm as I confronted him. I do not belong exclusively to you, or to anyone else. Maximus, in my own woman. Is that clear to you? I shot back, my eyes locking with his. His expression remained as cold as ever, his gaze unwavering. I don't remember asking for your opinion on the matter. His tone flat and detached. The coolness in his voice only fueled the fire inside me. Calculated demeanor always made me lose my temper. I clenched my jaw and pressed on, unwilling to let it go. I don't share the same opinion. Maximus, from now on, you're not allowed to decide my professional moves, I declared firmly, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Maximus's gaze hardened, his lips curling into a displeased frown. The hell in not. You can do whatever you want in your professional life as long as you stay the hell away from this ass. His tone laced with a dangerous possessiveness that sent a shiver down my spine. His words stung, but I didn't have the energy for another argument. It was always the same with him, dictating, controlling, never listening. I knew it would lead nowhere productive, and truth be told, I didn't have the courage to keep fighting him. Silently, I turned away from him, my eyes scanning the room as we continued to make our rounds, greeting guests with a forced politeness. I spoke only when spoken to, offering empty pleasantries to everyone around us, my mind racing with thoughts like howled in voice. Maximus's grip on me, both metaphorical and literal, was suffocating, and I was trapped in a game I hadn't chosen to play. The night was finally over. The few remaining guests had trickled out, and I felt the weight of exhaustion settle heavily on my shoulders. I could barely keep my eyes open as we made our way back to Maximus's house. Each step up the stairs felt like a struggle, my body aching for the comfort of my bed. But just as I was about to reach my room, Maximus's hand shot out, gripping mine with surprising force. Blinking sleepily. What? I mumbled, trying to suppress a yawn. Where do you think you're going? His voice was tinged with irritation. To my room. Where else? I replied, my tone casual despite the exhaustion settling in my bones. Maximus's grip tightened, pulling me to a stop. I think I made it clear earlier that from now on, we'll be sleeping in the same room. My bedroom. Why? My voice laced with boredom. I wasn't in the mood to argue. Especially not now. Because we're mates. Adelina. That's why. His expression bordering on smug. But don't worry. Tonight we'll just sleep in each other's arms. I'm too tired for anything else. I stared at him incredulously. What? You must be out of your mind if you think I'm going to sleep in your bed. Maximus's smirk only deepened, his eyes gleaming with amusement. Why not? We had such a great time last time, he said arrogantly, making my cheeks flush with embarrassment. I was fuming. His impudence was infuriating. How could he be so shameless? Who do you think you are? Maximus, I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of frustration and anger. Relax. I'm just teasing you, he said with a playful glint in his eyes. My room connects to an adjoining bedroom through an internal door. You'll sleep there from now on. Come on, I'll show you. I hesitated, reluctant to follow him. Something about the way he said it felt like one of his games. When he noticed I wasn't moving, he turned back toward me with a teasing smile. What's the matter? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. A glint of challenge in his eyes. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I retorted, trying to sound confident and unaffected by him, but I knew my voice betrayed me. He closed the distance between us, leaning in just close enough that I could feel the heat of his breath on my ear, afraid of being alone with me in a room. His voice low and impossibly alluring. A sweet shiver ran down my spine as his breath tickled my ear, and butterflies fluttered in my stomach every time he came near me and whispered like that. I couldn't help but react, despite my better judgment. My body craved his presence. The warmth of his touch, the tenderness of his kisses. It was like my mind was fighting a battle against my own instincts, and I was losing. I couldn't deny it any longer. I had to get away from him. I can't let myself succumb to his charm again. But standing there, so close to him, his voice so soft and captivating, I wasn't sure how long I could hold out. I quickly turned and walked away from him, heading toward the door, my heart racing in defiance. I threw open the door and stepped inside, turning around to face him, my arms crossed tightly in front of my chest. I was doing my best to project confidence, to let him know that I wasn't swayed by his teasing. Maximus stood in the doorway, watching me with an amused expression, his lips curved into a playful smile, his grey eyes twinkling with something I couldn't quite decipher: amusement, challenge, or maybe both. I could feel his gaze on me, and despite my best efforts, it sent a rush of warmth to my cheek. Those eyes, those damned eyes of his, they were like a magnet, putting me in no matter how hard I tried to resist. And his smile, when he smiled from the heart, it was like the entire room came alive, and my chest would swell with something close to longing. It was maddening, this effect he had on me. I couldn't allow myself to get lost in it. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. No, I muttered to myself under my breath. Stop thinking about him. Adelina, don't let him get to you. I forced myself to look away, focusing on the space behind him. Anything but him. But in the back of my mind, those two piercing eyes and that devilish smile were still etched in my thoughts, playing over and over again. After a few seconds of trying to gather my composure, I finally spoke, my voice a little firmer than before, though I was sure if I truly believed the words myself. No, I'm not afraid at all. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Holding his gaze with as much determination as I could muster, Maximus raised an eyebrow and smirked knowingly, clearly not convinced. It was obvious he saw right through me, recognizing the subtle shifts in my expression, the way my voice faltered ever so slightly. He was clever enough to know that his charm was working far better than I cared to admit. He was right. There was a pull, an undeniable attraction between us, something I couldn't escape, no matter how hard I tried to convince myself otherwise. The warmth that spread through me whenever he looked at me, the way his smile made my heart race, it was all too much to ignore. Those eyes, that smile, would be my undoing. I could already feel it. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. This will be the death of me.